Hello, my name is Bill Phillips. I'm an aviation artist. I'd like to invite you to come along with me into my world, a world of flight as well as art. As a little boy, I was fascinated with painting and with aircraft. I have a unique opportunity to present the world in an entirely new perspective, that of man in flight. Up there, it's a world of fantasy and magic, towering cumulus clouds, the play of light over vast open spaces. And up there, it's a world of history. Throughout this century, men have flown out of challenge, curiosity, or necessity. We have designed aircraft that have become benchmarks of time and symbols of history. I paint scenes that reveal the beauty, the rush of adrenaline, the solitude, and the greater objectives of flight. When you're flying for pleasure, there's a special way the world appears from the air. It is magnificent, and somehow you feel a freedom of soul. And when you're flying combat for your country and your life, there's a bond of man and machine that can only be described as the greatest measure of trust. When you next look at aviation art, try listening for the sounds of flight, of space, of action, of people. For these paintings deal with people and courage.
You could see everything, a little bit, sometimes too much. In other words, you see you see a friendly plane go down, that's too much.
Well, we didn't do any maneuvering at all because we're in a tight formation. We've got airplanes within 100 feet of us on all sides in a group formation, so you can't move around. And of course, your strength comes from that formation, you have a concentration of firepower.
I had the jump on him because he was looking at the bombers. He just made an attack on the bomber formation you see there. And so he didn't know I was there, and the wingman would normally have been giving him cover, taking care of anybody that was attacking him.
What was it like coming in contact with the man who shot you down?
Ja, ich habe mich gefreut, ihn kennenzulernen.
Says he was pleased to meet him.
Not angry at him?
Sie waren nicht ärgerlich?
Nein, warum?
No, why should he be angry?
You are about to meet four of the men who inspired me to create The Hunter Becomes the Hunted.
This is Bill Phillips, the artist, Robert Schoens, Hal Stearns, Karen Quinn, our interpreter, for Herr Wolfgang Kretschmer, and Hub Zemke.
Jawohl. Delighted to meet you.
They will take you far beyond my impressions on canvas, to the very heart of this story.
The aircraft that you see, the P-47 in the background, is my aircraft as of that day. Yeah. We were escorting the bombers. It was incidental that that particular combat went on, but there was a real attack by the German Luftwaffe back a ways in the formation, and I was making a fast run with a squadron back to assist them. I saw this one aircraft down below making the attack, so I peeled off with 4 people and went down on him, and it so happened to be this gentleman sitting right next to me that we were attacking. So I was able to slip in real fast and gave him 2 5-second bursts, and you see what happened. It's his story after that. After shooting him, then I went on to engage 2 other enemy fighters, and by the time we got back to where the big attack was on the bombers, the battle was partly over.
The men who fought the war on both sides weren't Rambos. They were ordinary people who, when caught in the tide of history, were thrust into extraordinary
Probably
circumstances.
about half as fast.
Imagine yourself as a young man of 19 or 20,
They can do
faced with your own mortality.
Did you see him coming?
Im letzten Augenblick, ja.
In the last second, yes.
When it was a little too late. Ein bisschen zu spät.
Aber noch gerade früh genug.
Just the nick of time, he saw him, yeah.
And when you were struck, did you lose control?
Wie Sie getroffen waren, haben Sie die Kontrolle verloren vom Flugzeug?
Ja, das kann man sagen. Die Maschine ist senkrecht abgestürzt.
He said you could say that the machine went into an immediate nosedive.
The title, The Hunter Becomes the Hunted, describes the turn of events when the predator becomes the prey. In the blinking of an eye, the fortunes of war can change.
I love being a turret gunner with the B-17s. I thought they were the queen of the sky. To me, they were anyway. In fact, I volunteered when I was, about 19. I saw the movie. I said, boy, that's for me. And that's where I ended up. And we took off. And this time there was our group, which sent up about 21 planes from, the 100th Bomb Group. We kept going. We were okay, no problem, until we hit a place called Hazelloon. I can't even pronounce it. And we'd lost our escort because the first group had wandered 18 miles off course. That left us all alone. And down on the ground, the Germans knew it. They said, there's a group up there with no escort.
It was the first full-scale daylight bombing raid of the Nazi capital, Mission 250 of the United States 8th Air Force.
What was it like being up there just with everybody getting shot down?
Scary.
I mean, is it being a B-17 is like being a sitting duck?
If you're alone, absolutely. So you're absolutely, your chance of survival in a lone B-17 over Germany was next to nil. And everybody's expecting at least most of a group to return. So you land by yourself and you taxi over your own parking spot and all the rest of them are empty. And the squadron commander comes over to his tears in his eyes. And he wants to know what happened. What do you tell him?
The greatest American fighter outfit based on Britain. The Zemke Fighters, named after their commander, there with his executive officer. Both are aces, Colonel Zemke with 11 victories.
Do I remember it very well? Well, this particular painting here, well, it brings back memories, naturally. Yeah, very much so. Yeah. However, certain of it are embedded in my mind. I have forgotten a lot of combats, but under this particular occasion, certain incidents are imprinted on a person's mind. I can still remember shooting at him. I was saying to myself, hold still, hold still, hold still, hold still, hold still. You're in range, and at about 300 yards, bow.
On April 24th, 1990, 4 men who had faced each other come together for the first time to put the finishing touches on that day in history, when the target was Berlin. We came down to the Airman Memorial Museum, and I was on the bus with Hub Zemke. He had never met Wolfgang Kretschmer before, and this was going to be quite an event.
The first letter is a little difficult to write to a man that you shot down, but after that, we exchanged Christmas cards and greetings, and to my great surprise, I meet him this spring in Washington, D.C.
Ja, das ist er.
Ja, das ist er, natürlich. Und Ihr Name bitte?
Wolfgang Kretschmer.
Mein Name ist Hubert Zemke.
And then we got off the bus and saw these two adversaries have a chance to smile at each other and shake hands. It was just the camaraderie in that you have a flyer from the German side and a flyer from the American side. And the philosophies during the time of war were different. But here they come together and they've got one thing in common, and that's flying, and they both love it. Wolfgang Kretschmer told me that even a day after being shot down, he would have forgiven Hub Zemke, as they were two flyers doing their best.
It's just like I was a hired killer, right? Yeah. Okay, and I was supposed to play my part, which I think I was doing to the best of my ability. Yeah? But to meet him later, well, this was astounding.
This painting was the nucleus for bringing the two gentlemen together to meet for the first time. And the warmth that I saw exhibited by both of them towards each other was like old squadron mates or old friends that had just, they'd been apart for a long time, but they'd known each other forever. Hub Zemke's ability to speak German, they got on famously right from the start. They had a lot to talk about, and 46 years of questions were waiting to be asked and answered. It's nice as an artist to be able to sit back and look at the participants, look at your work, and know that what you've done in an abstract way that started out as an abstract has come together as a historically significant piece that, that they agree with, that they can look at and say, yeah, it's historically correct and it looked like that day.
Ja, ich wollte einen abschießen.
He wanted to shoot one down.
Okay. Had you seen Hub Zemke at this point?
Hast du mich gesehen? Nein. No.
Ich habe mich dann nochmal umgedreht,
He turned once around, but yeah.
zu sehen, ob jemand hinter mir ist.
To see if somebody was
Ich
in
habe
back.
das gedacht.
Yeah,
Das könnte sein.
yeah, it's possible that it could be.
Possible, ja, möglich.
As the gentlemen stood back and looked at the work of art and had a chance to discuss it among themselves, it made me feel really good to have a number of them point out like cloud formations, or we were here, or you were there, and I remember you coming in like that. One of the problems in being a historical artist is there are so many contradictions and so many variables as you're putting a painting together that have to be taken into consideration. It can be a real headache at times. This particular painting took almost three months, and it took me three attempts at painting it to get it right. We had, as we painted the first piece, and then we found something that was maybe different in a piece of documentation, and we changed it. And so it's a puzzle. It's a jigsaw puzzle. You're putting the whole thing together, and it takes some time to get all these pieces together because the participants remember things differently. Could you explain kind of what was going on in your case during this exact, or pretty close to this exact time period?
Yeah, I could tell you about
Okay.
that. Well, anyway, first of all, I see the square D. That's the 100th bomb group known as the Bloody Hundredth. And that looks just what was left of our group. All I remember, this would be our plane. I remember ME-109, I had the top turret. I turned around because I saw a half and half go down, it burst in flame. The German fighter cut right in front of us with the P-47 right on his tail. And he was right, it looked like we were heading right into our cockpit. But he swerved off, and this guy, whoever he was, thank God, was firing that gun, and I could see the bullets hitting this plane, and she just went down.
This is not the main body of the group. The main body of the group was under sustained attack by our enemy.
Right.
Yeah.
And fighters were coming at us from the front. And some of them were coming around and coming at us again, and some of them were doing what he was doing, coming in from the back and in singles and picking off the rear end. And this is apparently a picture of the rear where one of the German fighters is trying to pick off one of the bombers on the rear of the formation.
That happens to be the fellow right next to you.
Right here, this gentleman right here
Yes.
was the one trying to pick us off.
Here, go ahead.
Yeah, well, the end result was that after these three frontal attacks and attacks such as going on here, all of our bombers were gone but me, and I was left by myself to go on and drop my bombs in Berlin if I could make it.
Right.
Fortunately, I did.
And you were the only one left to come home.
Well, when it was all over, I was still in the air and nobody else was.
Yeah, he was the group, one aircraft.
Yeah.
This
They
gentleman
wanted to
here,
know
right?
if he made
It's more than airplanes, it's men, it's emotions, it's a time that I want to capture and put down as best as possible. You can look into his eyes, and in so doing, you pick up a little bit of the man's soul and what he feels, the real feeling, and that comes through, I think, on the paintings. One of the things that I enjoy doing is having the individuals that were involved in the painting sign the actual original artwork to verify the accuracy of it. Then the work itself becomes a historical document. This is kind of interesting at times, because many of the people have never touched a paintbrush or a small brush before. What I've done is to go ahead and mix the paint. They sit down, as you'll see here. They're actually signing their names, and I'm showing them how to move the brush and manipulate the paint on the surface. One of the most remarkable moments of the day came when Wolfgang Kretschmer took out a map which showed the approximate locations where he and his aircraft came down after being hit by Colonel Zemke. And it also showed where U.S. B-17 Fortress bombers crashed to Earth, some of which may have been destroyed by Kretschmer's squadron.
Almeria?
100th Bomber Group.
100th bomber. Here's one of your guys. Buried. Well, I'll be darned.
Und das ist
This is where he bailed out and where his airplane landed and where he landed, which is 100 meters apart.
This is a police report about the times of the flight attack alarm during March 6, 1944, on the Bremer Street, on a piece of farmland of the farmer Glinthaus, an ME-110 crashed and burned. This is not quite correct. The police officer made a mistake. It was the Focke-Wulf 190 which I piloted. The pilot, First Lieutenant Kretschmer, bailed out and was found severely wounded near the crash site and was brought to the Protestant hospital by the ambulance division.
wurde durch die Sanitätskolonne zum evangelischen Krankenhaus gebracht. Und da ist eine Messerschmitt 109.
That is a Messerschmitt 109.
Und die wird gestern in 8 Tagen gehoben.
Oh, they uncovered it nur 8 Tagen zurück?
Ja.
Diesen Jahr?
Ende April haben wir in Quakenbrück.
As I returned in last April, I spoke with a group of people who dug up planes and tried to restore the things that they dug out of the earth of the planes that had been downed. Some of these planes were flown by unknown pilots. Some of the planes themselves were planes that were unknown to these people, so they form a sort of war mystery for them. And on the 30th of April, I attended as one of these planes was dug up in a town called Quakenbrück, and the plane had landed about 100 meters north of where my own plane had landed.
The moment of truth finally arrived when, standing in front of aircraft similar to the fighters they flew, the Focke-Wulf 190 and the P-47 Thunderbolt, Kretschmer and Zemke conversed in detail on the event of March 6, 1944.
Und eine Staffel aus dem Platz so, die zweite Staffel so, die dritte Staffel so.
They took off in scrambles across the field in all directions by Staffels. That means by flights. Und zusammengekommen.
Ja, und dann gesammelt.
Then they went together.
Rendezvous.
Und dann auf Höhe.
And then climbed to the heights. Und then was kommt next?
Und dann das Ganze, hatte das ganze Geschwader gesammelt.
And Barr brought the whole squadron together.
Und es kam der Frontalangriff.
And then came the frontal attack on you guys.
Die kennen das.
You're aware of that.
Oh, yeah, I heard that.
Kennt it.
I remember.
Und dann im letzten Augenblick drunter weg.
And the last minute they fired at you, last minute they went down below. Gut?
Below the squadron.
Warum hast du endlich ohne...
Ich weiß es nicht. Ich
can't understand why he was by himself. He ended up by
I was going
himself.
to ask him, why was he alone back there?
Yeah.
Ich war plötzlich alleine.
He was absolutely, can't understand it why.
Das war der erste Einsatz im Westen, bei dem ich Feindberührung hatte.
Well, it was his first mission in the West, on the West Front, and probably they were not acquainted. Gut?
Und dann habe ich einen Verband vor mir gesehen.
And then he saw another formation, a Verband in front of him.
Und dann bin ich an den Rechtsaußen ran
And he went to the extreme right and attacked.
und wollte abschießen.
And he desired to shoot him off. Okay.
Und bei etwa 400 Meter Distanz,
Yeah, and a distance of 400 meters.
ich hatte komische Gedanken
He had peculiar thinking is in his mind. Yeah.
und habe mich umgeguckt und habe ihn gesehen.
And he looked over his shoulder and saw me. Yeah, and I was saying, hi, hi, hi.
Oh, there. Go ahead, shoot.
Hat er gewunken?
Doc.
Ja, und dann, wie gesagt, das Flugzeug brannte sofort.
And immediately he was hit, and his airplane caught on fire, and then he had a difficulty. Nochmal über diesen Schwierigkeit, sie haben auszusprungen.
Also, das war ganz schwer.
It was very, very difficult.
Ich bin nicht rausgekommen.
He wasn't able to get out of the airplane.
Und zuerst habe ich gedacht, die Kabine wäre nicht weggeflogen.
And at first he thought that he hadn't released his canopy, and he was worried completely.
Weil ich die Augen zu hatte.
His eyes had been from the
Wegen
fire
der Flammen, nicht?
been closed completely. Go ahead.
Ja, und dann ging die Maschine senkrecht.
And of course his machine at that time went in a steep dive.
He's in trouble.
Dann habe ich mal kurz zur Seite geschaut,
And he
geguckt
looked just a glance to the side,
und merkte, dass die Kabine weg war.
and he marked time that his canopy had left him. Doc, good.
Dann habe ich versucht,
Then he
also
tried.
dann habe ich das Schloss gedreht und wollte raus und das ging nicht.
And he tried to turn his parachute in the safety position, and nothing happened.
Wouldn't lock.
Aber hast ihr Ihren Fallschirm
Ich
geöffnet?
war ja noch in der Maschine.
Ah!
Dann habe ich
He
nichts,
wasn't out of the machine. I asked him whether his... Yeah.
We're still
ich
fighting
habe,
this.
ich habe nichts mehr gemacht, das nutze ja nicht.
Ja,
und dann
and there was-
plötzlich war ich in der Luft. Und dann habe ich mich überschlagen.
Yeah, and he didn't do anything else, and he was helpless, and the thing went end over end, and
Und dann musste ich warten. Sie
Ja,
wissen
he had to
warum.
wait.
Wegen Ziehen und
yeah, he had to wait, and he was thrown out, and he had to wait for a while to pull his ripcord. Good.
ja, und dann machte der Fallschirm einmal so
Yeah, and
und einmal so,
the Fallschirm is the parachute swung back and
aber nur
forth,
einmal, zweimal.
Only
Eins,
twice,
zwei,
it swung
und dann
back.
war ich unten.
and he hit the
The
ground.
ground. Wasn't
Twice.
burned or anything though, the parachute.
Ihren Fallschirm war nicht gebrannt.
Nein,
No, it
das
wasn't.
das hatte ich gedacht da oben.
He thought above.
Yeah.
He was spraying a little bit. Okay.
Aber genau. Ja, als ich dann also frei war, habe ich gezogen
And he tried to pull it again,
und dann passierte nichts.
and nothing happened.
happened.
Und dann passierte immer noch nichts.
And it still didn't happen. Okay.
Und immer noch nichts.
And still nothing. Well, he's continued on.
Und dann war ich plötzlich im Schirm.
And suddenly, boom, he was in
Popped
the,
out.
and it popped out. Okay.
Ja, und dann stand ich auf einem Feld von einem Bauern
And he fell into a small farm
und
where,
hatte also nur noch die Pelzstiefel an
Ja,
und
er hat-
bis hierhin war nichts mehr. Alles verbrannt.
he had a pair of
Nothing.
boots on, but his pants were
Pants were
burned out.
gone.
Ay, 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 ay.
They take off from a British base to bomb Berlin with speedy fighter planes.
There were three
escorted with
divisions,
hundreds of
about
heavy bombers.
700 aircraft going into
Specialized in
Germany.
daylight raids
They flew about to the German border when the first two divisions kind of took a small jog to the south, which exposed where these two men here were in the middle of it, and exposed them and opened it up, and these organizations were to the south. Now, part of my group, in fact, only one squadron of 12 were giving them escort way back on the tail end, and they saw in waves about 30 to 40 Germans going head on into them. Well, okay, they screamed for help. So between the fighters, whenever you needed some help in one position, you called for the other people. I peeled off with the organization about 30 miles up in front to go back and assist them. And in running back, suddenly I found that it got quiet, but I could see fires all over the countryside and crashed airplanes on the ground. The battle was really open. You can realize in 5 minutes, a battle between fighters will disperse itself over 100 square miles, just like that. That's only 10 miles by 10 miles, until there's people chasing each other back and forth there. And by the time I got back there, or close to there, the battle was pretty well over, and bombers were landing all over the place. About that time, I looked down and saw at the end of the bomber stream a lone FW-190 who had come in for an attack and let loose and was turning off to the side. And I dove, like I told him last night, that, okay, a bird in the hand is worth 2 or 3 in the bush. I peeled off and down with 4 guys. The picture doesn't show it, but there should be 4 other people in string. And I peeled off and zapped in on Herr Kirschmeyer, who was concentrating, basically, I think, on the bomber formation that he just fought on. So I put 2 blasts on him and caught him on fire, and I was off to look for some more aircraft. Of course, you got his story of his going down. So I went over and found another Me-109 scooting underneath. And we took him out and then ran back again a little further, but couldn't find any of the people that had given you defense, or were trying to give you a defense.
Scattered all over the
They were
countryside.
scattered all over the countryside. I know this.
The toughest moment came when it was time to sit and talk about personal thoughts that are usually reserved for one's closest friends. But feelings of closeness were running strong, and the bonds of friendship and understanding were growing.
I was really touched by the different stories of the wives and the love they had for their husbands or to-be husbands, and how much they wanted them to come home and they wanted the war to be over. And I thought it was really interesting that each story was really very similar to the other stories, and there was the human touch of wanting to be together, and that was the most important thing.
Well, I can't say honestly that I knew for certain he was out on the raid. But as a woman waiting at home for her husband, you assumed they went on every raid. You know, you just thought that's what was happening over there, that they were up in the air flying all the time. And so we read in the papers about the Berlin raid, the March 6th, the March 4th. We heard about Stan Seaton going down, and he was best man at our wedding. And then on the 6th, you know, you're just praying that your man's going to come home. You can't help but be selfish about it. And so that's what I did.
Gee whiz.
Oh, my.
We fully expected that Germany would do everything in her power to stop us. So it became more anxiety, because you know you're going to be under attack, you know you're going to get shot at more. At least that was our feeling. And so it's just going to be more of a battle. And your chances are getting slimmer. 8th Air Force formation was 95 miles long, strung out across Berlin. It took, what was it, 2 hours for the entire Air Force to pass a given point. And that in itself was quite an accomplishment when you stop to think that all those airplanes had to get together and get in line and get going in one direction. And I can't imagine being on the ground like she was, and seeing that going overhead. It must have been phenomenal. Your thinking is to keep your airplane in the air and not get it knocked down. And that particular day we were attacked. Concentrated attack was put on us, and by the time the attack was through, which lasted maybe 5 minutes, 6 minutes, something like that, I was the only airplane left in the air, as far as I knew, because I was alone. There was nobody around me. The fighters went home to refuel, and I was sitting there all by myself. And that is a dangerous position in itself, because a lone bomber is dead. Just about. If a fighter comes around, they can knock you down. There's no argument. They can get you. So we had to find something to do, and up ahead of us was another group, 5 or 6 miles away, which we caught up with, and went on to Berlin, dropped our bombs. And At Berlin, that particular group chose to turn left off the target, which took them in through the heavy anti-aircraft fire over Berlin. So we left them again and found another group above us and to our right, which we caught up with and went home. And in so doing, one of the things that we were warned about was captured aircraft being flown by Germans, B-17s being flown by Germans and joining up with our formation. So we had that to face too on our own, because they couldn't tell, those other groups couldn't tell who I was. I didn't have my name out on my airplane and waving a flag, so I could have been German just as well as not. And when we approached those groups, you could tell they knew that. They were looking at us, their guns were pointing at us, but no shots were fired, so we got back to the Dutch coast safely. When England came into view, why, we had to leave the group we'd been flying with and head for home, our own field. And of course then there's no more strain, no more stress. You're not bug-eyed at the sky to watch for fighters, and there's nothing shooting at you from the ground, so you have a little bit of time to think, and then you begin to think something's wrong, because I haven't yet seen anybody from my group. And by the time you get back to your field, it's obvious, because there's a whole bunch of empty parking spaces down there that should have airplanes in them by now. So when you land by yourself, and there's nobody there, and people sitting on the field look at you and wonder, where's everybody else? And the thing that struck us was taxiing by the ground crews waiting for their airplanes were struck down because there were no airplanes for them to take care of anymore. And even our own ground crew was stunned. They would normally come out and wait for us and shake our hands and wonder what happened, and this time there was nothing. They just couldn't believe it.
We were going together for about a year because we were too young to marry, and then he enlisted in the service. And we planned to get married after when he came home. And I am not too good on dates, but just the day that he was shot down, apparently, and I didn't know this, I was at my sister's home. I was sleeping there, and I woke up in the middle of the night with the oddest kind of feeling, and I saw how I didn't see a parachute. I didn't know he was shot. I just saw him coming down from the sky and landing near a tree or under a tree. I was ashamed to say I dreamt this, because I'm not that kind of a person, you know. I said, he's not dead. I'm telling you, he is not dead. That's it. I just knew it. And I think it was 2 months later, she received a telegram saying that they found him, he was captured, and he was a prisoner of war.
3 of them came down. I was watching the sun, because that's where they usually came out of the sun, 12 o'clock high. And all of a sudden I heard a voice. It was Scotty. He was a radio man. He says, fighter at 3 o'clock. Then the tail gunner said, fighter at 6. And then I heard from the ball turret gunner, said, fighter 3 o'clock low or 6 o'clock low, I don't remember. But I turned my turret towards 3 o'clock, where Scotty had yelled, fighters at 3. And at that time, he got it right in the neck. He died just like that, I know it. Then I got my fighter, Chris got his fighter. We knocked down the 3 fighters. We were alone again, but this time the sky was clear. There was nobody around us. It was a big sunny day, you know, and Frank looked at the plane and says, Jesus, we gotta get out. Plane's on fire, the 2 engines on the left are out. So we bailed out of the bomb bay doors. Of course, I also lost my assistant engineer, a kid by the name of Brownie, good boy, missed him. They were both dead. There's no use even looking. Then I landed. It's a group of German people. I landed near the forest in the plowed field. I tried to hit the forest, but I couldn't. It's just a little bit too much when I try to pull the strings. But I did land on the plowed field, and the trees were about a half a block away. Well, of course, on March 4th, you know, I got the first German over Berlin. They made a big thing out of it. There was a recall, we heard it, but we didn't turn back. All the other planes turned back, and there was a group of us, about 29 planes, 95th and 100th, that's 29 planes. We continued on to Berlin. The sky cleared up, and Frank, my pilot, says, Hal, there's an There's a fighter pilot coming out of the sun, 12 o'clock high. I'm trying to give it to you fast. I turn my turret around, and he says, Hal, you see him? I said, yeah, I got him. He said, he's coming in. I said, hold it, he's too damn far. And I got a little closer, and about 700, and I got him in my sights. I gave him a burst. He got closer as I was talking. And I gave him a burst about 400, and Murray Geiser, the navigator's in the front, says, Hal, you got him, he's on fire, he's going down. Then Brownie saw him go down into the ground. Now I had to go back to Passaic, New Jersey before I went overseas. My dad took me to the bus stop. He was crying. And he said, Harold, he called me. He said, what you gotta do when you get there, you shoot first and shoot straight. And I kept that in my mind. He said, if you wanna come back, you gotta do it first. And I did. Then I wrote him a card when I got that first fighter pilot. I said, Dad, I had that in mind when I shot him down.
I had the opportunity to look through Harold Stern's book of memories and found this letter he wrote home one day after shooting down the first enemy aircraft over Berlin, and one day before he himself was shot down on March 6, 1944. Dearest Mother and Dad, this has been a day of grace. I've had a pretty busy week. Don't be surprised when you read the papers. By the time you get this, you will know I've gotten credit for an enemy fighter. Dad, remember what you told me about shooting straight? I've always gone up with those words pounding in my head. Believe it or not, it's been snowing here. The snow is still on the ground. It's really a beautiful sight, what with the moon shining brightly. I'll write a letter tomorrow. Love to all, Harold.
For us, it was like this. We were engaged, and when you were engaged to a pilot, you did not even think about getting married. Only after the war. Nobody knew if they would come back, and I always listened to the radio. And on this March 6th, we ate together in common, and everything was quiet. On the radio, they mentioned a gigantic attack on Berlin. And I don't know. It was as if someone hit me. My fiancé is with them. Something has happened. I somehow felt it in some way. And then I was somehow unable to concentrate on my work all day. And then a colleague of mine came by and she said, something is going on with Wolfgang. Someone is unable to get through. They will call back in the evening. And then I received the notification I should come immediately to Quakenbrück. His life was in danger, and I was so excited. The train connection was very difficult. Silesia here, Quakenbrück up there. This would take a whole day. So I took the train the next morning, looked a little bit at Dresden. That was such a beautiful town, at a layover. Then the train took off right in front of me, and I finally arrived in the evening. I could not go to the hospital that evening. I went to the hospital the next morning. First, I went to a room, and in it lay two Americans. One of them I heard that was you. But I didn't know that you have been shot down too. And they told me that he was next door, and there was such a little thing, totally bandaged. I didn't envision anything like this, and I thought I'd leave again. But then he called, "Come over here." This was so touching. And then came the doctor, Dr. Fleming. He owes him so much. And he explained this to me. He pulled off his whole skin immediately, and I should stay a few days. He lay there under morphine, and then I took care of him from morning till evening. And when I got up, he asked, "Are you leaving?" I said, "No, I stay here." It was so touching. It smelled like in a tiger's cage, the skin and the pus and everything. But he did not really notice it that much. And then he started to give up. But I told him, "You will get well again. Just watch it, and then we will get married." And he did get well again, and it was May 20th, 1944, and we got married. And I was so happy that the war was over, and I had also hoped that my husband would not be called to the front again. And I thought the war was over for him. No, when he was well again, he was an active person, and what should he do? And I was always so fearful, even today, when he is invited privately to fly. I am always worried that he will crash again. But he got home and was well, and I am so happy that all of us can be here, alive and well and happy. And Mr. Zemke, I found it so very touching how he described, he was really without experience in the Reichsdefense, he mentioned, that all of a sudden he was completely alone. He was not used to anything like this. And then it happened. And they told me that the day before he had said, "I never have jumped out with a parachute." And then it happened to him.
Gar nicht so die Erfahrung gehabt, nicht? Sagt, ich war auf einmal ganz alleine und das war auch nicht so gewohnt und es war dann passiert. Und den Tag vorher hat man mir erzählt, hätte noch gesagt, ich bin noch nie im Fallschirm ausgestiegen. Und dann war es passiert.
Ja, natürlich wollten wir, dass wir
Of course, we wished that we would win the war. The actions of Hitler, Hitler as a person, we did not recognize as what he was. At that time, we were 18 or 19 years old, and we were told things which were actually not correct. We had to believe it. It is understood that we wanted to win. You cannot think anything else. My wife always says, and rightfully, it is a good thing that we lost the war, because all the things we heard afterwards, we really did not know.
Ja, das ist für mich ein
Yes, this is a great experience for me. It is nice that after so many years, the opposing sides from that time come together and are now friends.
zusammenkommen und Freundschaft.
I think this is the most important fact which we experienced during the past decades.
Was wir in den letzten Jahrzehnten erlebt haben.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you all for being here. As a director of the Airman Memorial Museum, it's a distinct pleasure to welcome you all. This museum is dedicated to the enlisted personnel who make the aircraft fly and keep them going. It's to the gunners, the mechanics, the cooks, the bakers, the air police. And that's how we met William S. Phillips. Bill Phillips was a former Airman First Class, and we are proud to be associated with Bill, his artwork, and with Greenwich Workshop. And we'd like to thank you for allowing us to serve as the site for the hosting of The Hunter Becomes the Hunted. Thank you very much.
Well, you can appreciate, I think, the feeling of what exists here, that this event, this small incident in a great battle took place 46 years ago, and it didn't occur at that time to any of us, including any of my organization, that I'd ever get together to repeat this scene and to go through this entire thing, and that we would have an outstanding artist put this on canvas, and we'd be doing this on video. I've never heard of video at that time. So the actual bringing together of all of us that participated this in a little brief second in time is phenomenal in itself, period.
Ja, für mich war das,
For me, signing the picture meant that all pilots, no matter what side they fought on, were really from one big family, and that by signing this picture, the war not only came to an end, but with a great deal of help, there would be no more wars like this to fight. And it is also very important for me that I met these people who were once against me, and now we meet in health and in happiness and form a new friendship.